Hello, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Richard Benjamins, and I'm here to tell you about the new LUCA Talk about the challenges, societal and ethical challenges of artificial intelligence and what we do about it. Whatever I will tell you here is also written up in a white paper, which we will distribute to you afterwards. And also this presentation that you will see, we will also distribute it at the end of this event. Now hang on, I'm going to share with you the presentation. Yes, I hope you can see it. So 6 challenges for AI's sustainability, and what should we do about it? You've all heard a lot about artificial intelligence today. According to many research firms, it's one of the biggest opportunities moving forward. It will change our lives, our work, the way we have fun, lots of things, and it's also a huge business opportunity. But why is it that AI is so popular today? First of all, there are great applications. Medical diagnosis, self-driving cars, automatic translation that we use all the time, personalization of content, and even composition of music and other arts. And more recently, even IBM came up with IBM Debater. That is an AI that is able to hold debates, public debates about political issues. Very interesting. What you see here in the middle is another application of AI. That is, you have 2 people. One is that making movements and gestures with his face, and it's projected onto a different person that is actually not making those gestures at all, but it looks like that it making those gestures. So very interesting and very advanced. AI is not new. It's already there for 60 years. But why is it so successful today? First of all, because there is a huge amount of data, a data abundance that wasn't there many years ago. And also, Moore's law has continued. Processing power is increasing, costs are reducing. So there is a huge amount of computation power that can now do the trick. And then there is new machine learning technologies like deep learning, which is responsible for most of the advances in the different fields of artificial intelligence. Now, I will not talk about what is artificial intelligence as such. We wrote another white paper on that, which you can also download from our web, and it will also be in the white paper that we will distribute. A few topics that are important to understand is that there is narrow AI and general AI. General is like us, like people. They can discuss any topic in different grades of sophistication, whereas narrow AI is a lot of knowledge about a very specific area of application, like cancer diagnosis, translations, etc. It's important to make that distinction. And then there is symbolic AI and non-symbolic AI, also referred to as AI based on knowledge, on explicit knowledge, and AI based on data. What we see today is all AI based on data using deep learning that is really making the difference. But there is no specific knowledge behind it. It's just data, there is learning, and then behavior happens. To measure AI, there is still the traditional Turing test that says basically that if a person cannot make the distinction anymore in a dialogue between a person and a computer, then he's supposed to pass the Turing test. Okay, a little bit about AI, but it's really not about AI itself. It's about challenges that AI is facing. So I'm sure you've seen some of those things come up in the news recently. This is about fairness, about fair AI, about treating people as we want, as humanity and society wants to treat people. A few examples here. On the left-hand side, you see there are 2 people who came in contact with the police, and then there was an automatic system that rated them. Would they violate the law again if they were released? And you see the scores of the AI, of the machine. White person low and black person high. And actually what happened was exactly the opposite. And after investigation, it turned out that there was bias in the training data for the machine learning algorithm, and therefore the bias was also available in the output. In the middle part, you see another example of, let's say, a negative side effect, which was that in the US there is a system that evaluates teachers automatically. It's an outsourced system to a company. And what happened was that one year a teacher was badly evaluated by the system, while she was very popular with the students, and they had great results. And when she started to, actually she was fired, and when she started to ask questions about, but why am I being fired, why I'm not being evaluated correctly or positively, there was no answer. So the system was a black box, and it could not explain the result, and so they went to court to fight the decision. On the right hand side, you see another example where past data is used to predict locations where crimes will happen, and also this data had a lot of bias in it, and what the system predicted was basically you have to send more police to areas where black people live. And if you then look at what really happened in the year afterwards, it turned out that it was much less in those areas. Again, it is all information that is getting into the data. It's then used by the learning algorithm, and the results are boosting the bias that is originally in the data. Bias means that the data is not representative for the population it wants to measure. If you take a very specific subset, then it works well for that subset. But if you generalize towards a large population, then you don't take the right decisions. Moving to the next slide. So if we foresee a massive application of AI and big data, then we see that we have to do, there are great applications, but it also comes with great responsibility. And what we will see here is 6 of those challenges of artificial intelligence that we have to deal with. And we have to deal with it, we have to understand it before it will be massively applied. There is lots of applications today, but not yet at a very massive scale. So, and if we don't treat those issues, that will lead to a lot of uncertainty and unforeseen consequences, with potentially a large negative impact on our economies and society. So it's very important to start acting and thinking about it right now. Now, what are those, let's say, challenges of artificial intelligence? First, there are the non-desired effects, which means basically this is AI made for good. It's for positive outcomes, for opportunities, but there are some side effects that we have not foreseen. We saw a few examples. Then also there is liability. So if machines take actions by themselves, who is responsible for their deeds? There are also unknown consequences. So what will actually happen with the workforce, with people's job, if AI is really massively applied across societies and across the world? The relation between people and robots, what is that? So currently there is not really a relation, but what happens if robots become much more intelligent, much better? Do we have to rethink that? Then there is the concentration of power and wealth. As we all know, there are large digital companies who have lots of data and are actually concentrating a lot of the AI investments across the world. And of course, that has consequences which we have to think about. And then, of course, intentional bad uses. There are good guys, many good guys, and a few bad guys, but everything that can be used for good can also be used for bad. So we also have to think about it and prepare. And the last point is it's not really, let's say, something that is not known, but you can also use AI for warfare and weapons. And while that is a political decision, an explicit decision, and some people think it's good, other people might think it's bad, it is something that we have to think about as well. Okay, now let's move into a bit more detail of those 6 challenges. The first one is the, as I said, non-desired effects of AI. Yeah? And I've tried to split them out in categories to make it as clear as possible, because sometimes they are mixed up in under bias. Yeah? First one is that we as people and society have agreed that some decisions cannot be taken on certain attributes, like political preference, sexual preference, medical status. This is what I call sensitive data. Yeah? Now, we as people can try to make an effort not to take decisions based on it, but if you give this information, if you give data to a machine and it learns from the data, of course, if those are the characteristics, the machine will find it and will use it to distinguish between groups, and will use it to make predictions. Think about loan assessments, or think about crime prediction, all those things. We don't want to include those data. It is, however, not so easy to take simply those attributes away from the data, because there are other attributes which highly correlate with those things. That's not always obvious. So it's well, it's easy to detect. It's not trivial to completely remove undesired attributes, and a lot of work still has to be done. Second point is biased data sets. This is already what I mentioned a little bit in the beginning. If you look at the system before, that is actually used by the U.S. justice system to help take decisions whether people can be released before they have to go to court. So people are arrested, and then a trial process starts, and then they have to go to trial. In that period, some people are taken into custody, other people are released. Yeah? Now, looking at all the data, the difference between the machine and the judges who did it seems quite reasonable. That's the left part, yeah? Which is split out between black and white people, yeah, in race. But if you look at the other columns where there isn't made a split between, let's say, the color of the skin, you actually see there are more false positives in the black defendants, and there are more false negatives in the white defendants. And that means a false positive if somebody is, the machine predicts that something will happen and actually it doesn't happen. In this case, the machine predicts that the person will not show up at court and therefore has to take it in custody, but actually the person shows up in court. So, and you can see here, people who are taken into custody too quickly are the black people, and people who are released too quickly with a higher risk are the white people. So this is typical bias that we want to avoid to happen. The third point is that important domain decisions are sometimes hidden in the algorithm. So as I just explained, if you predict things, then you have, let's say, an accuracy measure of the algorithm, and that tries to optimize the true positives and the true negatives, by minimizing false positives and false negatives. Now, you can have a lot of, let's say, mathematical functions that try to minimize the, let's say, the false positive and the false negatives together, or only the false negatives, or only the false positives, etc. But actually, this is not a technical decision, because depending on the domain, a false positive can be much more, can have a much bigger impact than a false negative, and the other way around. So if you have a medical diagnosis and you have a false positive, that means that somebody is diagnosed to have a disease, but actually doesn't have it. A false negative is the other way around, that you say somebody is healthy, but actually he doesn't. So what is important? So in optimizing, in defining the accuracy function, this type of information is very important. And usually it's left to, let's say, data scientists and engineers to make these decisions, while it is actually a domain decision that, depending on the domain, needs involvement of really experts. A fourth problem, or say non-AI, is explainability. So AI can take a lot of difficult decisions in very specific areas like facial recognition or speech recognition, as we said, the classification of diagnosis, etc. But it's not always easy to explain why. And in some domains, actually, the explanation of the decision is part of the decision. If you just have a decision, let's say we have to release this person or we have to send this person to jail, but there is no reason why, or the system will give, then actually you cannot accept it as a person to take that decision. Yeah? Now there is lots of work going on to make that happen. For instance, if you do image recognition, you can try to recognize and show in the picture to people, look, I think this is an elephant because of those areas of the picture, those pixels, and I also think it's a traffic light because of those things. If you highlight that, they can actually human understand why, to some extent, the machine takes such a decision, and you can discard it or agree with it. And then finally, a non-desired effect of artificial intelligence is also privacy, because in the end, current AI works with data, and if that is private data, then that may introduce unforeseen risks. Yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time about privacy, because I think everybody has been talking about privacy with the coming into force of the GDPR. We've seen the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I wrote a post on that, analyzing a bit more detail with some lessons learned, which you can also find on the LUCA website. And well, this is an important thing that we have to take into consideration if AI will be taken up massively. Okay, so far for the non-desired effects. Again, those are things that it's not because AI is bad, because all the people using this AI want to do good things, make good business, improve society, but there are some side effects that we have to take into account. Secondly is liability. Yeah? Artificial intelligence sometimes is called self-learning autonomous systems. Yeah? Those are systems that take decisions by themselves, and actually they learn. That means that you can design the system, but after it has learned a lot, maybe the designers themselves have no clue or don't know what the behavior the system will perform in the future. So at some point in time, the system may do something where the designers say, I had no idea the system could do this. Yeah, that can be for good and can be for bad. Now, when something goes wrong, there is always the question, who is responsible? Yeah? And now the European Commission has started a committee on legal affairs that has in-depth researched and discussed what should be done. Yeah? And they came to a temporary conclusion that actually for autonomous self-learning systems, for those robots, maybe we need to have a new legal entity, a new legal person, like something like an electronic person, yeah, that also has responsibility, that can do things, that can create good things, can damage things. It's all about liability. Yeah, it's not easy to define exactly what it is, and actually, this document of the European Commission, you can see it on the top, the bottom left, actually created quite some reaction from a group of people and scientists who wrote the European Commission an open letter, where they said, no way we have to create a legal personality for a robot. Yeah? It doesn't make sense, etc. So you can ask yourself, so what is a robot? A sophisticated robot, is it like a dog? I mean, if you own a dog, it's your responsibility. If the dog bites somebody, it's your responsibility. Yeah? Is it like a child? Until 18, you are responsible for the child, whatever the child does. There's lots of discussions going on, but something that has to be solved if we have massively self-learning autonomous systems. Yeah? Now, as you know, there are some places in the world where it is allowed to have self-driving cars on the road. Yeah? Now, self-driving car is a perfect example of an autonomous self-learning system, where the car learns a lot of things that actually nobody has foreseen. And if you want to test those cars, then the government has to come up with a law that regulates especially those things. Yeah. Now, if you see on the right-hand side, this is a copy of the what happened in California, and actually the links to the source are under the images here. So if you get the document, you can click on it. It says that you can do the testing with autonomous cars, but you have to have an insurance and you have to have enough capital in case anything goes wrong. Yeah? Which means that they didn't solve the problem of liability. They just postponed it and said anybody who wants to do test better have a big pocket, yeah, with money in case things go wrong. For testing, that's good, but in order to make this sustainable over time, a solution needs to be found. Okay, let's go to the third one, which is the unknown consequences of AI. Okay, if AI is massively adopted, robots are doing massive tasks. Of course, what everybody thinks, well, what will happen to our jobs? Will we still have jobs? My daughter wrote a report for school about will I still have a job in the future? Thinking about artificial intelligence. Well, actually, nobody knows at this moment. There are people who say yes, 70% of the jobs will be automated. Then, of course, it depends on the types of jobs. But there are also people who say no, we don't automate jobs. We actually will automate tasks. And a job has maybe 20 different tasks, so part of them will be automated, part of them will not be automated. So the nature of the jobs change. So basically what will probably happen is that some jobs will disappear, many jobs will change, and a lot of new jobs will be created because we don't know how it will look like. And in that sense, to some extent, it's similar to other technological revolutions, because any introduction, massive introduction of technology has changed the whole the world of working. Now, suppose there will be a lot of people who will lose their job because of automation of AI, and especially maybe in the shorter term. So what will happen then? Because we all pay taxes on our income, and then the government gets that money to manage the country. So if robots take over, then the government loses a lot of income. So what happens then? And then there are different opinions. Like Bill Gates said somewhere that, well, if the robot takes the job of a person, then that robot should pay taxes. So companies should pay taxes for the number of robots they have. But if you take them back to the past, where you had the car, the industrial revolution, even the PC, which he himself invented, that is a very strange thing how to implement it. And then the European Parliament says, well, we don't need robot tax. We need to find other things around robots. But suppose then, again, to the next point, what if less people work? So there is less income from the government, but then these people actually have no work, so they need social welfare. They need to have money to live. So there's going to be a lot of stress on the government finances because the income will go down drastically, whereas the let's say what they have to pay is also increasing significantly. So there comes up the notion of the universal basic income that says that everybody should have some income independent of whatever they do. And there is lots of discussion going on. So there are pilots in a few places in the world, and governments make statements about it, and nobody knows what will happen. So that's why I call it an unknown consequence, because we know it's a big consequence, but in what direction and whether it will be disastrous or not at all, we don't know. I think what we know is that in the let's say the next 10 years, rather than replacing people by robots, there will be a lot of collaboration between people and AI, in the sense that each of both does what he or she can do best. People are creative, are communicative, are inventive, etc. Whereas machines can do a lot of stuff at the same time, basic calculation stuff. So I think if you bring them together, there's actually a lot to win. The fourth topic that has to be dealt with if AI is massively applied and if AI is becoming more and more intelligent is how do they really relate to people. So in Japan, there are lots of things going on where robots are used for elderly care. So of course, Japan is a different society. They are much more used to interact with machines and let's say non-human entities, and so there robots are used in the hospitals to help patients, but also at home with elderly people to make them feel less lonely. So that is something that is specifically happening in Japan, and well, maybe it could happen here, but what are the limits of those relations? Yeah, and then on the work floor, could a robot be our boss? Because in the end, they take objective decisions. They have no politics. They have no favoritism. And actually, they can do a lot of complicated work. Yeah. Actually, in the HR world, if people leave companies, they don't leave the company, they leave the manager. Yeah? So if you had a perfect manager as a boss, maybe you would always stay. Of course, there are lots of pros and cons in this, but it's also something that has to be found out. Yeah? And into the extreme, that is the bottom right, you can ask, can people marry robots? Yeah? And there's only one person today, I think, in the world that has married a robot. It's a Japanese person who married his own robot. And he seems to be very happy about it. It's true that Japan is the most advanced society in terms of how people can relate to robots. I think they already have a code of conduct for that. And even going further, some people predict that in 35 years, marriage between people and robots will be normal, will happening, and actually those marriages will be much happier. You can read the information later. So there's a whole range of what the relation between people and robots can be. Definitely, it's not going to be. It might change, or it can be like it is. Depends on a lot of things, but it's something that has to be discussed a lot and has a lot of big and ethical and societal consequences. Now, the fifth is concentration of power and wealth. Yeah? So we all know the GAFAM, yeah, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft in the US and also in China. They call the BACs, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Have huge, because of the business they do, have huge amount of data, yeah? By far more than any of the other ones. So they already have a kind of monopoly in the services they give, and they're starting to do more. And a lot of people say, okay, AI boosts productivity, but it increases wealth only for the wealthy. Yeah? So the inequality, it makes inequality on the earth bigger, which is not a good thing. Yeah, and and Amazon also has lots of data, and it has a facial recognition system that they actually offer as a service to police departments. Yeah? So the police departments, they may recognize people on the street or on photos using, let's say, algorithms trained on data from Amazon, and then they take decisions for the public system, which is quite a strong thing to happen. Yeah? So the consequences of the concentration of power of wealth are threefold. Yeah? So there's the economic impact. So do other companies still have a chance to play in this space, or will a few take everything? And it's hard to compete with less data, because data is the fuel of the digital economy and the digital world and artificial intelligence. Of course, we saw before, there is the danger of bias. If this is data from those private companies, nobody knows whether they are representative, whether they have any bias, etc. So that's a danger. And it also is a danger that because of the data they have, they can deliver the best services in the sense what the police is doing, yeah? AI as a service. And then it's a black box. You have problems with explaining the results. There might be bias, difficulties with accountability. So, yeah, we're not sure whether that is the right thing to happen. But if nothing happens, this is probably where it will go. Now, if you look at how can you think about this, yeah? So the concentration of power and the concentration of data. On the one hand, you have the data, and on the other hand, you have the algorithms. Now, for each of those two, you can think, okay, I can have everything closed, so closed data, closed algorithms. I can have mixed, yeah? Some is closed, some is open, and I can have open data. Yeah? Actually, open data is already a big thing, especially in public data, and some companies are thinking about open data. But of course, for the big companies, the GAFAs, it will be hard to open all of their data because that's their propriety. So on the right-hand side, you see the Open Data Institute, the ODI. They wrote a very good report on the role of data in AI business models in the sense that I just explained. And actually, that's a good framework to start. So how to deal with the concentration of data in a few large players. Now, the last one is, of course, intentional bad uses. Yeah. Now, no surprise, and in the world where we live, this is really you cannot expect that this is not going to happen. There is actually quite an extensive report, and it's called The Malicious Use of Artificial Intelligence, and it distinguishes between three types of things. Yeah, it says there is digital security, so this is has to do with cyber attacks to critical infrastructure. Yeah? So hackers can lay down, the government systems or electricity systems, so critical infrastructure, which has a lot of software in it. They can attack that. So that's something to think about. Physical security as well. You have a lot of bad things happening in the world, but imagine you have a lot of self-driving cars, or you have a lot of autonomous drones, and suddenly they're hacked, and they from a public transport, they can be turned into weapons. Yeah? So that's something that has to be thought about. And then there is the political security. Yeah? Of course, we've all heard about fake news and the influence it may have. Those are things that are happening now, and they're starting, but they can become worse if we don't take care. And then, of course, there is mass surveillance in terms of government, which is what is now going on in China. So artificial intelligence is, these are not new issues, but let's say thanks to or because of artificial intelligence, the bad uses can be magnified significantly. And then finally, as I said, this is not something that generates so much insecurity as the previous ones, because this is just a decision. Yeah, and some people may think, other people think it's bad. Yeah, how can we use AI for warfare and weapons? Yeah? They speak of killer robots or lethal autonomous weapon systems. Yeah, so those are systems that a drone that has face recognition, it can detect the terrorist, and if the system thinks, yes, it's them, and there is an order, etc., then it might shoot the person. Yeah. Now this is very advanced. It enhances the distance, because it can be all automated. It enhances the distance between, let's say, the person giving the order to do it and the victim, and yeah, that is a very different tough thing to talk about, but it is important. Yeah, and there are also people who try to kind of have an agreement between countries where they say, okay, we will never use AI for lethal autonomous weapon systems. Yeah, now France and Germany signed up, but later, a few weeks later, after they said they would sign up, they actually withdraw, and they were under heavy critic from that. Also, the United Nations Convention has written a letter, an open letter about what they find acceptable and what not. And even at companies, this has an impact, because at Google, because of its participation in the Maven project in the US, which was a project for warfare, 3,000 employees sent a letter and published that letter, and actually Google has reacted to that. So also a very important thing, but some people will see it as a good use and other people will use it as a bad use. Yeah? It's a political decision. Okay, so quite some challenges. I hope I have been able to lay them out in a way you can understand it. What can we do about it? Yeah, very briefly. First, all government institutions are acting. Yeah, they all have written or writing now a report, a strategic report of what certain countries have to do with AI. Here you see just a few examples of the UK, France, and the European Commission. They all mention investments in AI. Yeah? Every country wants to step up their investments, get better. will not lose against the GAFA. They all speak about ethics and legal issues that have to be solved by massive uptake of AI. And they all speak about education, what happens to work, what happens to employment, how to upskill the current workforce and also the new one coming up. Then the UK specifically put a focus on, you can invest a lot in those technology, but if you don't make sure it goes also to the market, then it doesn't serve a lot. France is looking to see whether there is a European answer to the data concentration of the GAFAs, by stating that there's a lot of European industry with lots of data. If we could bring that together some way or another, then maybe there is an answer. And the European Commission is putting a lot of effort on people, work, and skills. Secondly, private enterprises need to position themselves. And actually, when I started thinking of this, was several weeks ago, we were in a different world. So Google started, was pressed to come up with their principles because of this whole military project part. And actually, Google came up with principles where they say that they want to use AI for good things, and they will take decisions on specific products by weighting the benefits and the risk. But if the benefits largely outweigh the risk, then they will do it. Microsoft has come up with their AI principles. Again, if you click on those things, you will go to those principles. IBM as well. Facebook and Accenture even say they have a tool now that can detect bias in data sets, which would be very helpful for making sure that the tools are fair and do not discriminate. And on the other hand, you have organizations that try also to make people aware, people who work in those areas, who build those systems, that they become more aware of the potential implications. So there is the Holberton-Turing oath that, like medical doctors have to state an oath before they accept their profession, well, maybe data scientists and artificial intelligence profession people should also state that they solemnly pledge to dedicate blah, 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 to the good things of humanity. United Nations, the World Economic Forum has stated 5 principles. Telefonica yesterday launched its new digital manifest with also 5 pillars for human-centric digitalization. And so there is a new area coming up which is called ethics by design, like privacy by design, which is now being implemented. Is all about making the people working with those things, building those things it's about awareness, it's about training, setting a process and checklisting questions, and also tools to make sure that whatever AI systems we build, they are fair, they are accountable, they are transparent, and they can explain what they do. So this is definitely something that is happening at the moment. Another thing that I have to take into account is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So here it's very important to distinguish between safety-critical systems, so systems that really have big impacts, and other applications like marketing or advertising. So if you receive a wrong ad from Google or from whatever on the internet, nothing happens. It's not a good ad, but nothing happens. If you send somebody to jail, well, you shouldn't, or if you diagnose somebody incorrectly, that has a big impact. So we have to distinguish between the different applications, and we cannot apply the same rules to all of them. Then on data privacy, as I said, the GDPR has been much in the press, and I will not explain anything about that, only saying that it is important to distinguish between when we speak about personal data and about anonymized data. Those need different treatments. Also for AI, there are lots of AI systems that use personal data, and there are lots of AI systems that use non-personal data. Then, also talking about privacy and a potential solution, one of the risks that is, one of the privacy risks associated to artificial intelligence and also big data is that data has to be organized. So usually data is gathered together somewhere centrally, and then the algorithms are run on the data to come up with insights and making decisions. Now imagine that instead of moving the data around the world from the, let's say, the premises, it can be companies or public administration, to central systems, why don't we try to leave the data where it is and then send in the algorithms to the data, run them locally, and then get the results and integrate results. So that would solve quite some risks for the privacy danger. And actually, if this could work, then there are lots of companies who would be more willing to share data of insights with the wider society. This is something that is pushed by Sandy Pentland's trust data, and it's something to really to follow. It's still early days. And then almost at the end, we should not only use data and AI for commercial things, but also for good. Yeah? So there are lots of projects going on, and Telefonica is involved in several of them, where we apply machine learning and big data to help managing disasters, to help predicting pandemics and diseases, or to help improve the air quality in large cities. That is something that is only starting, but it's very important to be responsible as an enterprise and to contribute to solving the challenges of using artificial at large. And finally, I think that there also might be the need for a international multidisciplinary organization that oversees what's going on in the world. Yeah? It doesn't have really a body yet, but it's something like what happens in aviation. Yeah, if a plane crashes somewhere in the world, there is an independent research. It's well coordinated. There is authority, and people take up the conclusions, etc. Maybe we need something similar for artificial intelligence and data. Okay, so any deadline for solving those 6 challenges? Well, of course, it's better to start as soon as possible. If there is a deadline, think about the singularity point, which is the point where machine intelligence will equal human intelligence, and from there on, nobody knows what will happen. Some people believe this point will happen, other people don't believe it, so it's more a conviction than a science, but it will take still several years, but by then, definitely uptake. So finally, a closing word. So artificial intelligence and big data, actually, the reason for them, one of the reasons to start using them is that people are very subjective they have a lot of intuition, a lot of experience, but in the end they take decisions because they like them, yeah, with a lot of personal, emotional things. Machines are objective, yeah, the data is objective to some extent, so that's why it's better to take decisions using data, yeah? Data-driven decisions. However, we've seen that even if machines are good, they also can learn this same subjectivity, and they can even self-learn, and so it's not all that positive. Yeah? And we've seen all the consequences of that, but I think we should not forget the original reason that they are there to improve the decisions that people make. And also take into account, well, people always take the right decisions, taking all the decisions, and are the decisions people, leaders in the world, are they always fair and human friendly? Well, we all know the answers. Yeah? And then there are decisions with good intentions that have catastrophic, non-desired consequences and side effects. Those things happen, and so it's not that suddenly those things are now there because AI is there. No, they've always been there, and it's good to be aware of that. And for one thing, humanity as large actually has ample experience in managing those wrong decisions and also recovering from catastrophic situations in the world. And I think that's also a very positive thing, and I'm sure it will also help us through, let's say, the challenges of artificial intelligence. Okay, thank you very much. I think you can see me now. I'm getting the questions through here. The question is that I mentioned the UK, France, and the EU about working on artificial intelligence and the documents which actually are already published. What about Spain? Yeah, actually, Spain is in the process of writing its white book, yeah, on artificial intelligence in the same way as all the other nations are doing it. So it's about the opportunities, where the Spanish economy, what are the strengths and where is it more important to apply artificial intelligence, but it's also about ethical and legal issues, and of course about the workforce training, education, etc. So, and also they talk about ethics by design, like a kind of methodology. As you know, in Spain recently the government has changed, and that probably means there will be some delay in publishing the report, but it is. Let's see if some other questions have come through. At the moment, not. Okay. Yeah, of course. So we will distribute the document, the white paper, and the presentation. And if you have any questions further, don't hesitate to contact us through our website or through LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to try to do our best to give you any answers. No questions anymore? Okay, so thank you very much for joining, and see you in the next LUCA Talk.